The trap was meant for animals. But the moment it snapped shut, the entire fate of two civilizations quietly changed. On the quiet frontier world of Aurelian 7, a lone human hunter named Ethan Cole crouched beside a shallow stream glowing faintly under alien moonlight. The strange forest around him hummed softly, alive with bioluminescent plants and insects that looked like drifting sparks. Ethan adjusted the rope trigger of his trap and leaned back against a curved tree trunk. He wasn't hunting for glory. He wasn't even hunting for money. He was simply trying to survive. Humans had arrived on Aurelian 7 only 3 years earlier after their colony ship suffered a navigation failure. Now a few hundred settlers struggled to build a life on a world that seemed both beautiful and dangerous. Ethan was one of the few who knew how to hunt the native wildlife. Tonight he hoped to catch something rare, a glowhorn stag, a large animal with crystal antlers rumored to provide enough energy cells to power an entire settlement. If he caught one, the colony could run heaters through the coming cold season. If he failed, well, humans had learned to live with failure. The twin moons slowly climbed higher in the sky. The forest whispered. And then the trap snapped. The sound echoed sharply through the quiet night. Ethan jumped to his feet. Finally, he whispered. Heart racing, he ran toward the clearing where the trap had been set. Branches scratched his jacket as he pushed through glowing violet grass. His mind already imagined the massive creature caught in the net. But when he burst into the clearing, he stopped so suddenly he nearly fell. Hanging upside down in the trap was not a stag. It was a girl. Or at least something that looked like one. Her skin shimmered faintly silver under the moonlight. Long strands of deep blue hair floated around her face like strands of glowing water. Her eyes burned with bright amber light. And she looked extremely angry. "Release me immediately," she shouted. Ethan blinked. What?" She twisted in the net with surprising strength. "You primitive creature. How dare you capture a daughter of the Valari Empire?" Ethan rubbed his forehead slowly. Of all the things he expected tonight, an alien princess was not on the list. "Okay," he said carefully. "Let's slow down for a second." Her eyes narrowed. "You will address me with respect, hunter." "I'm not actually a hunter," Ethan replied. "I mean I am, but not of people." She glared harder. "Explain yourself." Ethan pointed at the trap. "That thing was for animals." Silence fell for a moment. The alien girl looked at the ropes around her. Then at Ethan. Then back at the ropes. "You expect me to believe this is a coincidence," she said slowly. "Yes. You expect me to believe that a human trap just happened to catch a Valari royal scout." Ethan paused. "Royal?" Her chin lifted proudly. "I am Commander Lyra Varel, third daughter of the High Strategist of the Valari fleet." Ethan sighed deeply. Of course she was. Because the universe apparently enjoyed ruining his day. "Look," he said, raising his hands peacefully. "I didn't know you were here. I've never even seen one of your ships." Lyra studied him carefully. Her glowing eyes moved across the clearing. She seemed confused. "You truly did not know?" "No." Another pause. Then Ethan carefully stepped forward and began loosening the ropes. Lyra stiffened. "Do not attempt anything dishonorable, human." "Trust me," Ethan said. "I don't want problems with alien empires." After a moment the ropes loosened enough for her to drop to the ground. She landed gracefully, like a dancer who had practiced the motion 1,000 times. Ethan attempted the same balance when stepping backward, and immediately slipped on glowing moss. Lyra stared at him. "You are surprisingly clumsy for a trapmaker." Ethan stood up, brushing dirt off his jacket. "Yeah, that happens." For a moment they simply looked at each other. Two beings from completely different worlds. Two strangers standing under alien moons. Then Lyra suddenly looked toward the sky. Her expression changed. Concern flashed across her face. "That is not good." Ethan followed her gaze. Far above the clouds, faint lights were moving across the stars. Dozens of them. Ships. Large ships. What are those? Ethan asked. Lyra's voice became very quiet. My people. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay. That's probably fine. Lyra shook her head. No, human. She looked directly at him. They will not believe your story. Why? Because Valari scouts do not get caught in animal traps. Ethan considered that. Fair point. And when they see me standing beside a human, she continued, they will assume you attacked me. Ethan sighed. Let me guess. Lyra's golden eyes glowed brighter. They will destroy your colony. The wind rustled softly through the alien forest. Ethan looked up at the approaching lights again. Then he looked at the broken trap lying in the grass. All he wanted tonight was food for his people. Instead, he might have just started an interstellar war. Great, he muttered. Lyra studied him again. You do not seem afraid. Ethan shrugged. Humans are good at dealing with impossible problems. And how do you plan to solve this one? Ethan looked toward the distant hills where the human colony lights flickered faintly. Then he smiled slightly. Well, first we make sure your fleet doesn't think I kidnapped a princess. Lyra crossed her arms. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Ethan pointed at the sky. By doing what humans do best. Improvising. Above them, the Valari warships grew larger as they entered the atmosphere. And somewhere in the quiet darkness of Aurelian 7, human ingenuity was about to face its greatest test. The sky above Aurelian 7 slowly filled with light. At first the stars simply faded behind massive shadows. Then the clouds parted as enormous shapes descended through the atmosphere. Valari warships glided through the night like silent mountains of metal, their engines glowing with deep blue energy. Ethan Cole had never seen technology like this before. Each ship looked large enough to swallow the entire human colony. Beside him, Commander Lyra Varel stood very still, watching the descending fleet with a mixture of relief and worry. They arrived faster than I expected, she said quietly. Ethan crossed his arms and squinted at the sky. Yeah, that's usually how rescue fleets work. Lyra ignored the joke. They will scan the entire area in seconds, she said. When they detect you, they will assume you are my captor. Ethan sighed. Then we better make sure they don't think that. The first warship stopped above the forest, hovering like a dark moon. A beam of light swept across the trees as scanners searched the ground. The air vibrated with power. Even the glowing insects vanished into the shadows. Lyra turned to Ethan. You should leave. He shook his head. If I run, your fleet will definitely think something is wrong. She frowned. Humans are strange. Yeah, Ethan said. We get that a lot. Suddenly a column of white light shot down from the largest ship and struck the ground nearby. The beam solidified into a landing platform. 3 armored figures stepped out of the light. Valari soldiers. They were tall and elegant, their armor smooth and silver, glowing softly along the edges. Each carried a long energy spear that hummed with dangerous power. They approached slowly. The leader stepped forward and bowed his head slightly toward Lyra. Commander Varel, he said. His voice sounded calm, but his eyes moved immediately toward Ethan. And the human responsible for your capture. Ethan raised one hand politely. Technically, that was an accident. The soldier did not smile. Lyra stepped forward quickly. Stand down, Captain Reth, she ordered. There has been a misunderstanding. The soldier looked surprised. Commander. Lyra pointed at the broken trap in the grass. The device was meant for animals. I activated it accidentally while scouting. The soldiers looked at the trap. Then at Ethan. Then back at Lyra. Captain Retha's expression remained serious. With respect, Commander. Valari scouts do not become trapped by primitive tools. Ethan whispered quietly to Lyra. See? I told you that would be a problem. Lyra ignored him. This human did not attack me, she continued firmly. He released me when he discovered what happened. The captain studied Ethan carefully. You freed a Valari officer after capturing her. Ethan shrugged. Seemed like the polite thing to do. The soldiers exchanged quiet looks. Finally, the captain spoke again. Our sensors detected a human colony nearby. Ethan nodded. Yeah. About 300 people. The captain's voice hardened. The Valari Empire cannot allow unknown civilizations to threaten our scouts. Lyra stepped forward again. They are not a threat. They are humans, the captain replied. Lyra hesitated. Ethan noticed the change in her expression. What? He asked. She looked at him slowly. My people have heard stories about humans. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Good stories or bad stories? The captain answered instead. Stories of a species that survived extinction events, planetary collapse, and endless wars. Lyra continued quietly. A species that refuses to surrender. Ethan smiled slightly. Yeah, that sounds about right. The captain folded his arms. That is exactly why they are dangerous. Silence filled the clearing. Ethan looked at the soldiers. Then at the massive warships above them. Then back at Lyra. Okay, he said slowly. I think we need to clear something up. The soldiers watched him carefully. Ethan pointed toward the distant human colony. My people didn't come here to fight anyone. We came here because our ship broke. Captain Reth narrowed his eyes. And yet your species continues to spread across the stars. Mostly by accident, Ethan admitted. Lyra looked slightly amused. But the captain remained serious. The Valari Council will decide what to do with your colony. Ethan sighed. That doesn't sound promising. Lyra suddenly stepped forward again. I will speak to the council myself, she said. The captain looked surprised. You would defend them? Lyra glanced briefly at Ethan. They showed mercy when they had the advantage. Ethan blinked. Wait, I had the advantage. You captured me, she replied calmly. With rope. The captain looked at the trap again. Then slowly shook his head. A rope trap. Ethan spread his hands proudly. Simple but effective. The captain was silent for a long moment. Then he finally spoke. Perhaps there is something we should test. Lyra looked confused. What do you mean? Captain Reth turned to Ethan. If humans are truly as clever as the stories claim, then one human should be able to solve a small challenge. Ethan groaned. I don't like where this is going. The captain pointed toward the massive warship hovering above them. A Valari tactical puzzle. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. That test is designed for military strategists. Ethan looked up at the giant ship. Great. No pressure. Captain Reth continued. If you solve it, your colony will be considered allies. And if I fail? The captain answered calmly. Then the Valari Empire will remove your species from this world. Ethan rubbed his face. Of course it's life or death. Lyra stepped closer to him. You do not have to do this. Ethan looked toward the colony lights in the distance. Then he smiled slightly. Humans don't usually get invited to alien strategy games. He turned back to the soldiers. All right, he said. I'll try. Captain Reth nodded. Then come with us. The beam of light returned, forming a path up to the warship. Lyra watched Ethan carefully. You truly believe you can solve a Valari tactical puzzle? Ethan stepped toward the beam. No idea. She frowned. Then why agree? Ethan looked back at her and grinned. Because humans are really good at figuring things out. After we're already in trouble. Above them, the warship waited. And somewhere inside its massive halls, a simple human hunter was about to challenge the greatest minds of the Valari Empire. The inside of the Valari warship looked nothing like Ethan expected. Instead of dark metal corridors and harsh lights, the interior felt strangely calm. Smooth walls curved gently like flowing water, glowing with soft blue patterns that shifted slowly as people walked past. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Ethan followed Captain Reth and Commander Lyra through a long hallway that opened into a massive circular chamber. In the center of the room floated a giant holographic sphere. It looked like a miniature galaxy. Dozens of stars shimmered inside it. Fleets of ships moved slowly between them, forming complex patterns. Lyra spoke quietly beside him. "This is the Valari Strategic Core." Ethan raised his eyebrows. "That thing runs your fleet?" "Yes," she said. He walked closer, studying the hologram. Hundreds of tiny ships moved across glowing star systems. Defensive lines surrounded key planets. Supply routes formed bright pathways between distant sectors. It was beautiful. And incredibly complicated. Captain Reth stepped beside him. "This simulation represents a real conflict currently being studied by the Valari Council." Ethan crossed his arms. "Let me guess. You want me to solve it?" "Yes." The captain gestured toward the floating display. "Our fleets are defending these worlds." A group of blue ships formed a wide defensive wall. An unknown enemy approaches from 3 directions. Red fleets appeared on the edges of the hologram. "They outnumber us." Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay." The captain continued. "The objective is simple. Protect the core systems. And stop the enemy advance." Ethan watched the simulation carefully. The Valari fleets were perfectly organized. Every ship had a precise position. Every movement was controlled. It looked like a flawless strategy. Which was exactly the problem. Ethan leaned forward. "How long have you been trying to solve this?" Captain Reth answered calmly. 32 years. Ethan blinked. "Seriously?" Lyra nodded. "Our greatest tacticians have studied this problem. And no solution has succeeded." Ethan looked back at the hologram. Then he started laughing. The Valari officers stared at him. Captain Reth frowned. "You find this amusing?" Ethan wiped his eyes. "Sorry. But I think I know why you're stuck." Lyra crossed her arms. "Explain." Ethan pointed at the fleets. "You're thinking too perfectly." The captain narrowed his eyes. "That statement makes no sense." Ethan shrugged. "It makes perfect sense if you're human." He reached toward the hologram. "Can I try something?" After a moment, Captain Reth nodded. Ethan tapped the glowing interface. The simulation restarted. Blue fleets formed their defensive wall again. Red fleets advanced slowly toward them. Lyra watched carefully. "So what will you do?" Ethan stretched his fingers. "Well, first we break the rules." The Valari officers stiffened. "You cannot break the rules of strategy," the captain said. Ethan grinned. "Humans do it all the time." He grabbed one of the Valari fleets and suddenly moved it away from the defensive line. Gasps filled the chamber. "You just abandoned an entire sector." Lyra said. "Yep." Red enemy ships rushed forward immediately. The Valari officers shook their heads. "Your defense is collapsing," the captain said. Ethan leaned back casually. "Just wait." The enemy fleets chased the retreating Valari ships. Then Ethan suddenly split the human-controlled fleet into smaller groups. Instead of fighting directly, they ran. The Valari officers looked horrified. "You are retreating?" Lyra asked. Ethan smiled. "No. We're distracting them." The red fleets followed the escaping ships across the simulation. Meanwhile, Ethan moved the rest of the Valari fleet in a completely different direction. The defensive wall disappeared. Ships scattered everywhere. The officers looked confused. "This strategy is chaos," the captain said. Ethan nodded proudly. "Exactly." He tapped the display again. The scattered Valari ships suddenly regrouped behind the enemy fleets. The red ships were now trapped between 2 forces. Ethan gave a small salute. Welcome to the human classic. Ambush and bait. The simulation froze. The enemy fleets were surrounded. Silence filled the chamber. Lyra stared at the hologram. Captain Reth stepped closer to the display. His voice sounded quiet. This outcome has never appeared in the simulations. Ethan shrugged. That's because you were trying to win perfectly. He pointed at the scattered fleets. Humans don't fight perfectly. We fight messy. Lyra slowly looked at him. You intentionally sacrificed territory. Yep. You allowed the enemy to advance. Yep. You risked everything. Ethan grinned. Also yep. Captain Reth turned slowly toward him. And you call this strategy? Ethan crossed his arms. We call it survival. The officers whispered among themselves. For the first time since arriving, the Valari soldiers looked uncertain. Finally Captain Reth spoke again. The simulation is successful. Ethan stretched his arms. Cool. Lyra studied him carefully. You solved a problem that our greatest strategists could not. Ethan shrugged. You were thinking like machines. What do humans think like? She asked. Ethan smiled. Like people who refuse to lose. The chamber doors suddenly opened. More Valari officers entered the room. One of them wore deep blue armor decorated with glowing symbols. Lyra straightened immediately. That is the fleet strategist. The officer approached the hologram slowly. He studied the final result carefully. Then he turned toward Ethan. You are the human who solved the impossible scenario. Ethan nodded. Guess so. The strategist looked at Captain Reth. Is the simulation accurate? Yes. The officer looked back at Ethan. For 32 years the Valari Empire searched for a solution. He paused. And a hunter from a broken colony solved it in 10 minutes. Ethan scratched his head. Technically 15. The strategist studied him silently. Then something unexpected happened. He bowed. The entire chamber fell silent. Lyra's eyes widened. Captain Reth looked stunned. The strategist spoke clearly. Humanity possesses a strategic advantage the Valari Empire has never understood. Ethan blinked. Oh. The strategist nodded. You are unpredictable. Ethan smiled. Yeah. That's kind of our thing. The strategist turned to the other officers. The human colony on Aurelian 7 will not be removed. Murmurs spread across the room. They will be welcomed as allies. Lyra looked at Ethan again. You just changed the future of 2 civilizations. Ethan shrugged casually. I was just trying to fix a misunderstanding. Lyra smiled slightly. Humans are remarkable. Ethan looked at the massive hologram galaxy spinning slowly above them. Then he laughed quietly. Honestly. This whole thing started because of a rope trap. Far below the warship, the alien forest of Aurelian 7 glowed peacefully beneath the twin moons. And somewhere in the quiet darkness of space, the galaxy had just learned something important. Never underestimate a human with a simple idea. Because when humans face impossible odds, they don't panic. They improvise. And sometimes, that changes everything.